I'm not a famous actress. I'm not the famous type. I really am a mom who cooked for her family.
There are lines around the block.
It's the chicken fried steak.
For years, millions of Americans believed Ree Drummond's life was proof that fairy tales could exist on a cattle ranch. The Pioneer Woman brand sold warmth, family values, home-cooked meals, and the comforting illusion that love and hard work could protect a family from almost anything. But what if the smiling television personality and her quiet cowboy husband were hiding a far darker reality? Behind the cookbooks, Food Network cameras, and booming Oklahoma empire, a devastating health crisis was quietly reshaping their marriage, their priorities, and the future of the ranch itself. The truth is far more emotional, controversial, and heartbreaking than most fans ever imagined, and it may explain why Lad Drummond has begun walking away from the life he spent decades protecting. The accident that changed everything. On March the 10th, 2021, the Drummond family came terrifyingly close to losing that foundation. Strong winds were sweeping across Osage County as dangerous grass fires spread through parts of Oklahoma. Like many ranchers in the area, Lad joined efforts to protect land, livestock, and nearby properties. His nephew, Caleb Drummond, was working beside him in a separate fire truck. Heavy smoke reduced visibility on the ranch roads. As the two men drove through the area, neither could clearly see what lay ahead. The trucks collided head-on. The impact was devastating. Caleb suffered severe injuries and was reportedly thrown approximately 70 feet from the vehicle. Emergency crews rushed to the scene while panic spread through the Drummond family and the Pawhuska community. In a display of the stubborn cowboy mentality that had defined him for decades, Lad initially refused medical treatment at the scene and reportedly drove himself to the hospital. At first, it appeared that he had escaped with relatively minor injuries. Doctors soon discovered the truth. Lad had fractured his neck in 2 places, and the injuries were serious enough to require surgery and metal hardware to stabilize the fractures. For the public, the accident became a frightening but ultimately hopeful recovery story. For Ree, however, it represented something much more profound. After nearly 25 years of marriage, she was suddenly forced to confront the possibility of losing the man who had been the center of her world since before anyone knew what the Pioneer Woman was. Later, Ree admitted that the experience changed her perspective completely. The empire they had built together suddenly felt fragile. Success, businesses, television ratings, and best-selling books meant very little when compared to the possibility that one ordinary afternoon could have taken Lad away forever. The family eventually recovered physically, but something emotional shifted after that day. Then, only months later, another devastating blow arrived. In November 2021, Ree's older brother, Michael Smith, died unexpectedly at the age of 54. Unlike Ree, Michael had lived a largely private life, but she described him as her first friend, revealing how deeply connected he was to her earliest memories and identity. The timing made the loss even more painful. The family was still emotionally recovering from the accident involving Lad and Caleb when grief entered their lives again. Despite the heartbreak, the Pioneer Woman machine continued moving. Restaurants still opened every morning. Television schedules still existed. Product lines still required attention. Millions of followers still expected Ree to appear cheerful, comforting, and dependable. And that may have become its own invisible burden, because grief does not pause for cameras, and emotional exhaustion does not disappear simply because people expect a smile. The diagnosis that no one saw coming. By the beginning of 2024, the Drummond family seemed, at least from the outside, to have found its balance again. Their businesses were continuing to thrive, visitors were still traveling to Pawhuska in large numbers, and family milestones were being celebrated with the warmth and closeness that fans had come to expect. Ree Drummond continued sharing glimpses of ranch life, cooking, and family moments with her audience, creating the impression that the difficult seasons of the previous few years were finally behind them. But according to the transcript, that sense of stability was shattered during what should have been nothing more than a routine doctor's appointment. What initially appeared to be a manageable medical concern reportedly led to further testing, additional appointments, and a growing sense of uncertainty that slowly spread through the family. Days turned into weeks as they waited for answers, and the emotional weight of that waiting became its own kind of burden. Every phone call seemed important. Every appointment carried the possibility of life-changing news. The ordinary rhythm of daily life suddenly felt fragile. For decades, Ree had been the center of the Drummond household. She was the person who prepared meals, organized holidays, remembered birthdays, coordinated family gatherings, and made sure everyone around her felt cared for. Whether she was raising 4 children, supporting Lad's demanding ranching life, or building the Pioneer Woman brand, nurturing others had become part of who she was. Caring for people was not simply a responsibility she carried. It had become deeply woven into her identity. Then came the devastating news that, according to the transcript, changed everything. Ree had reportedly received a serious diagnosis. In a single moment, nearly 30 years of carefully built plans were forced into a completely different reality. Calendars that had once been filled with filming schedules, cookbook projects, business meetings, travel plans, and family celebrations were suddenly overtaken by medical consultations, specialist visits, treatment discussions, and difficult decisions about the future. Priorities shifted almost overnight, and the life they had spent decades building no longer felt predictable. The emotional shock went far beyond the diagnosis itself. For the first time in decades, the roles within the Drummond family were being reversed. The woman who had spent years providing comfort, encouragement, and stability now found herself needing those same things from the people around her. The person who had always been the source of strength suddenly needed strength from others. For Lad Drummond, the change was especially profound. Ranching had taught him that most problems could eventually be solved through hard work, patience, and determination. Broken fences could be repaired, damaged equipment could be fixed, and storms would eventually pass. He had spent his entire life believing that persistence could overcome almost any challenge. But this was different. No amount of physical labor, long hours, or determination could remove what his wife was facing. He found himself watching the woman who had given up her own dreams to build a life with him enter a battle that he could not fight on her behalf. According to the transcript, this became a painful lesson for a man who had spent his life trying to protect the people he loved. Some battles cannot be solved through determination alone. And it was after this moment, the transcript suggests, that the changes in Lad's behavior finally began to make sense. The ranch that never changed until it did. Long before television cameras arrived in Pawhuska, Oklahoma, the Drummond Ranch operated according to traditions that rarely changed. Generations of cattlemen had survived droughts, economic downturns, harsh winters, and unpredictable markets by following one simple rule: the work never stopped. Every sunrise brought new responsibilities, and every sunset left unfinished tasks waiting for tomorrow. Lad Drummond embodied that tradition completely. He was not a ranch owner who managed from an office or delegated difficult jobs to others. He preferred to check livestock personally, handle equipment problems himself, and stay involved in every major decision affecting the ranch. Employees who worked beside him for decades knew exactly where he would be at certain hours and how he approached every task. Then, sometime during 2023, those familiar patterns began to change. At first, the differences seemed insignificant. A meeting was missed. A responsibility was handed to someone else. A decision that Lad would normally make himself was suddenly handled by another family member or a trusted employee. On a ranch covering more than 400,000 acres, however, small changes rarely go unnoticed. People around Pawhuska started talking quietly. Some assumed the explanation was obvious. In March 2021, Lad had suffered a serious accident that left him with a broken neck and required surgery. Many believed years of hard physical labor were finally forcing him to slow down, but those closest to the family sensed something deeper was happening. This did not feel like a rancher preparing for retirement. Lad still cared deeply about the cattle, the land, and the operation that had been in his family for generations. What changed was where his time was suddenly being spent. Co-workers noticed that he left ranch operations earlier than usual. Days that once stretched from dawn until dusk often ended in the late afternoon. He spent less time on horseback and more time at home making phone calls. The truck that normally carried layers of Oklahoma dust looked cleaner. His work clothes showed fewer signs of daily wear. In a tightly connected ranching community, unusual changes never remain private for long. Rumors spread through coffee shops, feed stores, and local gatherings. Some suspected lingering injuries. Others believed the family was facing challenges they had chosen not to discuss publicly. What nobody realized at the time was that the real reason had nothing to do with aging, laziness, or losing interest in ranch life. A much more heartbreaking reality was beginning to reshape the Drummond family from the inside out. The city girl who gave up everything for a cowboy. What makes Ree Drummond's story so remarkable is that she was never supposed to become the pioneer woman. Born Anne Marie Smith on January 6, 1969, in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, Ree grew up in a comfortable suburban environment that had little connection to cattle ranching. She excelled academically, dreamed of a professional career, and imagined a future unfolding in a major city rather than on the Oklahoma prairie. After graduating from Bartlesville High School in 1987, she moved to California to attend the University of Southern California. Los Angeles represented everything that excited her: culture, opportunity, independence, and urban energy. She eventually earned a degree in gerontology in 1991 and planned to move to Chicago, attend law school, and build a completely different life. Then, during a Christmas visit home in the early 1990s, fate intervened. One ordinary evening, Ree stopped at a local bar in Bartlesville and noticed a man standing across the room. He was nothing like the ambitious young professionals she had met in California. He was quiet, rugged, and seemed completely uninterested in drawing attention to himself. What caught her attention most were his hands, which revealed years of physical labor. That man was Lad Drummond. Their romance developed slowly and without Hollywood-style drama. Lad did not call immediately after they met, and Ree later joked that she wondered whether she had imagined their connection entirely. But when they finally went on their first official date, something changed. Standing on her parents' front porch at the end of the evening, Lad kissed her. 2 weeks later, he told her he loved her. Suddenly, the carefully designed future involving Chicago and law school no longer seemed certain. After roughly 18 months of dating, they became engaged, and on September 21, 1996, Ree and Lad married in an Episcopal church surrounded by family and friends. Shortly afterward, she moved 8 miles west of Pawhuska onto the sprawling Drummond Ranch. The adjustment was far more difficult than she expected. The woman who once imagined herself practicing law in Chicago now found herself living among cattle, dirt roads, weather reports, and endless prairie skies. Lad often spent entire days working across hundreds of thousands of acres, leaving before sunrise and returning long after dinner. Then came motherhood. Alex was born in 1997, Paige in 1999, Bryce in 2002, and Todd in 2004. With 4 children in 7 years, Ree's life became a constant balancing act involving homeschooling, cooking, ranch responsibilities, and parenting. Ironically, the frustrations and culture shock that once overwhelmed her eventually became the foundation of her success. Friends loved hearing stories about the former city girl trying to adapt to muddy boots, runaway livestock, and rural Oklahoma life. In May 2006, searching for a creative outlet, she started a blog called Confessions of a Pioneer Woman. She had no business plan, no television ambitions, and no expectation that anyone outside her circle of friends would care about her stories. Within a few years, millions of people did, from blog to multi-million-dollar empire. What began as a modest online journal quickly became one of the most successful lifestyle brands in America. Readers were drawn to Ree's honesty. She wrote openly about kitchen disasters, barking dogs, parenting chaos, marriage frustrations, and the unpredictable reality of ranch life. Unlike many polished lifestyle personalities, she did not pretend everything was perfect. Her food posts became especially popular, and in 2009 she published The Pioneer Woman Cooks, which became a New York Times bestseller. More cookbooks followed, along with memoirs and children's books inspired by the family's beloved basset hound, Charlie. Television executives soon recognized that Ree possessed something rare: authenticity. She was not a trained television host trying to perform a role. She was simply herself. On August 27, 2011, The Pioneer Woman premiered on Food Network. The show felt different from traditional cooking programs. Children wandered into scenes unexpectedly. Dogs interrupted filming. Family conversations unfolded naturally. Meals were prepared in a real kitchen rather than a sterile studio set. As the show grew in popularity, the Pioneer Woman brand expanded into cookware, furniture, home decor, kitchen accessories, and retail partnerships across the country. What had started as a personal blog gradually evolved into a business empire worth tens of millions of dollars. Then came an even more ambitious project, transforming Pawhuska itself. In 2016, Ree and Lad opened the Pioneer Woman Mercantile, a combination restaurant, bakery, coffee shop, and retail store housed inside a beautifully restored historic building. The response exceeded every expectation. Visitors began traveling from across the United States to a town with fewer than 4,000 residents. Additional ventures followed, including the boarding house, P-Town Pizza, and Charlie's Sweet Shop. Tourism exploded, and Pawhuska became a destination that many Americans had never heard of before. Ree Drummond put it on the map. Through all of this, one person remained remarkably unchanged. While Ree became the public face of a rapidly growing empire, Lad continued focusing on cattle operations, land management, and ranch responsibilities. He rarely sought publicity and appeared on camera only when necessary. Long before the fame, the television contracts, and the tourist crowds, he had been quietly supporting Ree's ideas and watching the children while she wrote blog posts late at night. Those closest to the Drummonds understood an important truth. Ree may have become the pioneer woman, but Lad was the steady foundation that allowed everything else to exist. That is what made the changes that began appearing in the early 2020s so unsettling. What Lad Drummond is really saying goodbye to. In the months following Ree's reported diagnosis, the transformation within the Drummond family became increasingly difficult to ignore. From the outside, many people still saw the familiar image they had known for years: the sprawling Oklahoma ranch, the successful businesses, the close-knit family, and the smiling photographs that continued appearing online. But behind those images, something fundamental had quietly changed. For most of his adult life, Lad Drummond had operated according to a single principle: the ranch came first. Managing more than 400,000 acres was not simply a job or a business. It was a responsibility inherited through generations of the Drummond family. Every day required constant attention, rapid decision-making, and an almost relentless level of commitment. Cattle operations, land management, weather conditions, equipment problems, and employee oversight left little room for anything else. The ranch had shaped his identity for decades, and those who knew him best understood that work was never something he could easily set aside. But after 2024, according to the transcript, the pattern that had defined his life began to shift. Responsibilities that had once belonged almost exclusively to Lad reportedly started being shared with trusted employees, family members, and his brothers. Daily inspections, operational decisions, and management duties no longer rested entirely on his shoulders. Tasks that he would once have handled personally were increasingly delegated to people he trusted. At the same time, Alex, Paige, Bryce, and Todd stepped more fully into adult roles. The children who had grown up running across the ranch and appearing in family stories were now helping protect the life their parents had spent decades building. Their increased involvement was not simply a sign that they were getting older. It reflected a family adapting to a new reality together. To outsiders, the change appeared easy to explain. Many assumed that Lad was simply slowing down with age or still feeling the effects of years of hard physical labor and previous injuries. From a distance, it looked like the natural transition of a rancher gradually stepping back from the demands of daily operations. Those closest to the family, however, understood something very different. This was not retirement, it was a deliberate choice. For nearly 30 years, Ree had built her life around Lad's world. She had abandoned dreams of Chicago and law school, adapted to the isolation and demands of ranch life, raised 4 children, homeschooled them for years, and stood beside her husband through financial pressures, family challenges, accidents, grief, and the overwhelming responsibilities that came long before fame ever arrived. Long before television cameras entered their home, she had already chosen his world over the future she once imagined for herself. Now, according to the transcript, the direction of that support had reversed. Without seeking sympathy or making dramatic public announcements, Lad reportedly began choosing time over work. He spent more hours at home, attended appointments, and became present in ways that the relentless pace of ranch life had rarely allowed before. The most striking part of the change was not that he stepped back from certain responsibilities, it was how quickly he recognized where he truly needed to be. As the transcript frames it, Lad was not saying goodbye to Ree, the ranch, or the life they had built together. He was saying goodbye to the version of himself that believed he had to carry every burden alone. That realization gives the story its deepest emotional power. The Drummonds survived ranch life struggles, financial uncertainty, tragedy, grief, and public pressure. What endured was not perfection, but partnership. Their photographs reflected a marriage strengthened by decades of sacrifices, fears, and victories. This story resonates because it reveals that when life becomes uncertain, love and togetherness matter more than fame or success. The controversial truth is that the pioneer woman's story was never as simple as audiences imagined. Behind the recipes and Oklahoma sunsets were real fears, real losses, real exhaustion, and real decisions about what matters most when life changes without warning. If this emotional story touched you, remember that even the strongest families face battles the public never sees. Ree and Lad's journey reminds us that resilience is not pretending everything is perfect, it is choosing love, loyalty, and faith when circumstances become painfully uncertain. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the Drummond family's hidden struggles. If you enjoy uncovering the real stories behind famous lives and want more heartfelt documentaries like this one, please like and subscribe to the channel because your support helps us continue sharing the stories that matter most.